More fallout tonight from the supermarket shooting in Boulder, Colorado. The suspect in the King Soopers massacre reportedly posted anti-Trump messaging as well as pro-Islam messages on social media. So, of course, the mainstream media is now trying to spin excuses for the suspect, questioning pretty much everything. Joining me now to discuss the radicalizing of the shooter is editor-in-chief at the National Pulse, Raheem Kassam. Raheem, before I start, I have to read you, because I saw you tweeted it out, former President Obama's statement, and he blames, you got to take a look at this, he blames, saying it will take time to root out the disaffection, racism, and misogyny that fuels so many of these senseless acts of violence. So already the narrative is being set. First of all, can you respond to that, please?
Well, I'll respond to it in the following way. Barack Obama seems to think he's still president, and maybe he still is, because he was out ahead of Joe Biden on this. He actually tried to set the narrative on this as soon as the shooter's real name and real identity was made public. It wasn't Joe Biden. It wasn't Kamala Harris. It wasn't the White House that set the narrative on this for the media and for the day to come as far as the Biden regime was concerned. It was actually Barack Obama. And what was the narrative, of course? Oh, well, you know, it's clearly misogyny and racism and whatever that's driving all of this gun violence in the country. We saw him pivot in that same statement to Atlanta, and then later on in the day, Biden did that very same thing, went up to the podium, said, hey, we don't know that much about the shooter from yesterday, so I'm going to pivot and talk about gun control instead. And that's what the narrative, as far as they are concerned, has been all day. The difference is, however, the American public saw one thing last night, which was CNN and all of these left-wing verified people on Twitter talking about how they suspected before we knew, which is prejudice, suspected that this was a white shooter, not that it should matter, anyway, but it turns out this actually is more likely an ISIS-inspired shooter.
Well, and as you say, I mean, reports are coming out now saying this is a Syrian refugee who was resettled here during the Obama years, possibly. I mean, now all of a sudden they're not talking about it, whereas last night, oh, it's white supremacy, but now it's, oh, let's talk about perhaps he had some mental issues that he was working through. But I think you make a very interesting point about Barack Obama setting the narrative to really understand, because who is running the country right now? All of us know Joe Biden may be the only one in the country who actually thinks he's running the country, but I mean, their messaging now is changing too. It's now the Biden-Harris administration. It's no longer the Biden administration. So how much do you believe, as you said, Obama is really instigating this? And I mean, it's sad to say, because this is a tragedy, capitalizing on this to push the radical gun control, the Beto on the campaign. Biden said, I'm going to put Beto in charge of taking everybody's guns away. Do you think that's the next step?
Well, Joe Biden thinks that he's running a country. He doesn't actually know what country. He couldn't place himself on a world map right now, I suspect. And the Team Obama, which is people who are in this current regime right now, who are in what they call administration, what I call a regime, because that's how they're ruling. All those executive diktats that we saw in the first couple of weeks, all the faux bipartisanship that we heard about, and then, of course, what happened? They went full pelt with a partisan bill, a COVID relief package, all of these things, they're not governing like you would expect an administration to govern. They're governing like a regime. It's only been a day since the razor wire came down right outside your studios here in Washington, D.C. So again, to answer your question, who is the thought leadership behind this? I suspect that we saw a little bit of a tell today that it is Barack Obama. And to come back to Obama's statement in of itself, now he probably didn't realize quite what he was saying when he put that statement out, blaming racism, but I think he may have been partially right there, because 10 out of 10 of the victims of the Colorado shooting were white. We have heard anti-white racism on social media, we have seen it on televisions, and now it is coming home to roost. This person who committed the terrorist attack in Boulder yesterday, I am convinced, was radicalized by the media and targeted white people.
Tell me more about that, because I know you've been talking about today, you had a podcast about it, talking about you really hold the media accountable for this and saying that they're pretty much to blame for this. Can you expound on that for us?
Well, look, I mean, there's several ways to think about this. Last week when there was an atrocity, an attack in Atlanta, when the majority, not the totality, but when the majority of the victims were of Asian ethnic background. We had hashtags trending and little emojis, and people were posting things, and hashtag Asian Lives Matter and all of that. Now that we have a totality of victims in Colorado who appear to have been targeted by an Islamic extremist, and again, I am saying, this is my opinion, that is because of their skin color that they were targeted, because of his beliefs about people of their skin color. Are we seeing White Lives Matter hashtags? Are we going to see white blocks posted on Instagram? I think not. And we're probably not going to see Don Lemon talking about this on CNN this evening either. The media picks and chooses its battles, and it picks and chooses them in a specifically depraved way. The depraved nature of how the media has targeted white people in this country for so very long is now manifesting itself in the actions of those who seek to do harm, evildoers. And instead of going after evil and evildoers and trying to shut off their means by which to access the country, to come into the United States of America, what is the Biden regime's response to this? Oh, ban the good guys from having guns. That'll stop the bad guys from shooting them up in supermarkets. It's a nonsense. People are going to go see through it. And it's just another one of the things that is going to add to Joe Biden's declining poll numbers. You see him slipping every single day with what's happening on the border, the CCP bullying him and his weakling foreign policy staff, and now the carnage of radical Islamic terrorism back on America's shores after a respite during a firm Trump administration because law enforcement knew what they were going after under Trump, and they've told to back off under Biden. You're now seeing that carnage return to America as well.
Exactly. I think you make such a good point. This radicalization that we saw, it stopped under President Trump. I think in the first few months, we all noticed it, and then we kind of fell back into how life used to be before this. But it's starting up again, and it's a really sad thing to see because the country is just going to keep getting more unsafe because, as you say, with the Biden-Harris regime, they're not listening to the people anymore, and we're really being ruled by them. So thank you, Raheem, for being on. I want you to come back on and update us because you're tracking the story so well, and I'm sure more is going to come out, but the narrative is being set, but we'll still expose the real story behind this.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.